They arrested her in the middle of the crowded terminal, cuffing her hands behind her back as confused passengers looked on. The officers barked accusations: stolen valor, impersonating a Navy SEAL, defrauding veterans for attention and respect.
She didn't resist.
She didn't even plead. She simply lowered her gaze, silent, almost calm, as if she knew something none of them did. When they hauled her into the interrogation room, her story unraveled under suspicion. A young woman, barely in her late 20s, claiming to be part of the most elite brotherhood in the military, an impossibility, they said. SEAL teams were an unbroken fraternity of men. No woman had ever made it through. Every medal she wore, every detail she gave, sounded like a rehearsed script from books and documentaries. The agents were certain they'd caught a fraud who studied too hard. And then the Admiral walked in. His face was unreadable, lined with decades of command. He studied her for a long moment before leaning forward. "Where did you get that tattoo?" he asked quietly, pointing to the mark half hidden beneath her sleeve. The room went still. One of the officers scoffed. "Sir, it's probably ink from some back-alley parlor. A cheap imitation." But the Admiral didn't look away. His eyes narrowed. "That tattoo is authentic. Issued only to one classified unit, and there are records that don't exist on public paper." He turned back to her. "So, Lieutenant, do you want to explain why you're sitting in handcuffs instead of the shadows where you belong?" For the first time, her lips curved into the faintest smile. The room shifted from confidence to unease. The interrogators, who minutes earlier treated her like a con artist, now looked at her as though she carried secrets older and heavier than all of them combined. She raised her eyes, and the calm in them was chilling. "You buried us," she said. "Every operation denied, every loss unacknowledged. And now, when I surface, you call it a crime?" The Admiral's jaw tightened. "You were never meant to surface." "But I had no choice," she whispered. "Because something is coming, something only we know how to stop. And if you keep me in these cuffs, Admiral, you'll be dooming more than just your reputation. You'll be dooming them all." The fluorescent light above hummed, and for a long moment no one breathed. The officers exchanged uncertain glances, while the Admiral held her gaze. Finally, he dismissed everyone from the room with a single wave. The door shut, leaving only the two of them. "What did you uncover?" he asked, his voice low, stripped of authority, as though he already feared the answer. Her silence lasted just long enough to draw the tension taut. Then she leaned forward and said, "It's not what I uncovered," she said softly. "It's what they released." The Admiral's face didn't move, but his knuckles whitened against the table. "Be specific." She tilted her head, letting the shadows catch across her features. "Do you remember the program we weren't supposed to speak about? The one even you claimed didn't exist? They called it Cerberus Protocol. An experiment to build operatives who could move like ghosts, vanish into the fabric of hostile states, and strike before the enemy even knew they were at war. We were the prototype. I was the first Admiral. The first who survived." The Admiral's throat flexed, but no sound came out. His silence was confirmation enough. Her eyes burned, unflinching. "They told us it was over, that the project was terminated. But it wasn't. Someone resurrected it, and now they've taken what we endured, what we bled for, and perfected it in places that shouldn't have access. I found evidence in Prague, in Marrakesh, in dead drops that were supposed to stay cold forever. They've created others. Stronger.
Faster.
And they don't wear our flag." The Admiral leaned back, every line in his face carved deeper by the weight of her words. "You understand what you're implying." "I'm not implying," she cut in. "I'm telling you, the enemy has what was meant to be ours. And they're already moving pieces across the board." A long silence stretched, broken only by the buzz of the overhead light. Then the Admiral asked, his tone clipped and almost fearful, "How did you survive?" The question landed with a heaviness that made the air taste metallic. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared at him with the kind of gaze soldiers only carry after seeing the abyss and walking back out of it. "I survived because I wasn't supposed to," she finally said. "Because someone inside wanted one of us left alive. Not to fight, but to remember. To carry proof that it happened. The Admiral's composure cracked, just slightly. He pressed his hand to his temple, exhaling through his teeth. You realize if this gets out, if Congress hears even whispers of this. They'll deny it, she interrupted, her voice steady. Just like they denied me. Just like they pretended we didn't exist. The truth will die in committee while the threat grows in the shadows. That's why I came here, Admiral. Not to ask. To warn. He studied her as if she were both a ghost and a grenade. And then, quieter than a whisper, he asked, why now? Her reply came, without hesitation. Because the first strike is already in motion. The room seemed to shrink, the air compressing between them. The Admiral's eyes hardened, the soldier beneath the bureaucracy surfacing again. He leaned forward. Details.
Now.
She leaned in too, her cuffs rattling softly. 3 nights ago, an asset in Istanbul smuggled me intel, encrypted coordinates. They point to a site in the Mediterranean, something buried deep, hidden beneath civilian infrastructure. A listening station, but not one of ours. They're building a launch point, Admiral. Not for missiles. For people like me. The Admiral's breath caught, sharp and controlled. He didn't blink. Insertion units. Worse, she said. Replication chambers. They're growing operators in batches, cutting the time it took to break us down and rebuild us into half. They've taken our blueprint and turned it into assembly line war. He sat back, the enormity of it pressing down. His hand trembled, just slightly, as it tapped the steel table. If that's true, it is true, she pressed, eyes blazing. And if you hesitate, if you let protocol and committees and secrecy tie you down, they'll deploy before you've written the first report. I didn't come here for your permission. I came here because you still have the power to act. The Admiral was silent again, but this time it was a silence filled with movement behind his eyes. Memories. Calculations. Regrets. He stood abruptly and walked to the mirror on the wall, the one-way glass that hid the watching officers. With a curt motion, he drew the blinds down over it, sealing them in complete privacy. Then he turned back to her. I should transfer you to a black site and let the machine chew you up again. That's what protocol demands. Her lips curved into a knowing smile. But you won't. Because you've always known the day would come when protocol wasn't enough. He stared at her, weighing every truth and every lie, until finally he stepped closer and unlocked her cuffs with his own hands. The clink of the metal falling away was louder than a gunshot in that suffocating room. Tell me everything, he said, his voice stripped bare of rank and title. Every name, every coordinate, every ghost you've chased. She rubbed her wrists where the steel had bitten into her skin, then folded her hands on the table with soldier's discipline. It starts with the man they called the architect. He was the one who designed the training that nearly killed us. We thought he disappeared when the program was shut down. But he didn't vanish. He defected. The Admiral's nostrils flared. Defected to who? Her eyes locked on his, unflinching. Not who.
What?
The words lingered in the sterile air like a blade held just above the skin, the meaning sinking deeper with every second of silence that followed. The Admiral didn't press her further. Not yet. He could feel the walls of his world shifting, the ground beneath them crumbling, as if the truth she carried would drag them both into a pit far darker than anything the Navy had prepared him for. And still, somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The Admiral stood frozen, her final words echoing in the sterile room like a countdown no one could stop. Not who, but what. He felt the weight of decades of command pressing down on him, the kind of burden only a handful of men alive could understand. For a heartbeat, he was no longer an admiral, no longer the iron spine of the Navy. He was simply a man staring at the storm he had secretly feared would one day arrive. She leaned forward, her voice low, deliberate, every syllable etched like a blade against stone. The architect didn't defect to a country. He defected to an idea. He built his own war, outside borders, outside nations. A shadow army that doesn't serve flags or presidents. It serves him. And now, it's almost ready to move. The Admiral's hand brushed his ribbons, the medals on his chest that suddenly felt hollow, like decorations pinned on a child's uniform. He whispered, "You're telling me he's building a state without soil?" She nodded. A state that can live anywhere, hide everywhere, and strike anyone. That's why I came back into the light, Admiral. Because once he deploys, no one will see the world the same way again. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the hum of the overhead bulb seemed to vanish, leaving only the pounding of blood in their ears. The Admiral stepped closer until his reflection merged with hers in the steel table between them. His voice was grim, steady, resolute. "Then we don't have months. We don't have weeks." He locked eyes with her, no rank, no walls between them. "We have days." And for the first time since her arrest, she allowed herself to exhale, a long breath that carried the weight of everything unsaid. She studied the Admiral, seeing not just a superior officer, but the last man alive who could make the choice that mattered. "You'll need to resurrect what you buried," she said. "Not just me. Others. Ghosts you left to rot. Soldiers you swore would never see daylight again. Because that's the only thing that can fight what's coming, a team forged in the dark, against the dark." The Admiral's jaw clenched. He remembered every name, every face, every file marked classified and sealed away in vaults that even the President had never seen. Men and women erased from history to protect history. And now, fate demanded he pull them back into the world. "They'll call me a traitor for this," he murmured. "They'll call you worse if you don't," she countered. Their eyes held, two warriors cut from different scars, bound by the same impossible oath, to guard a nation that would never know the price. Finally, the Admiral straightened, his voice iron. "Then I'll burn the playbook. I'll break the silence. And when this is over, there won't be medals. There won't even be names." She rose from her chair slowly, the chains gone, her movements fluid and deliberate, like a soldier slipping back into her skin. For the first time, the room seemed too small for her presence. "Names don't win wars," she said. "Ghosts do." The Admiral motioned her toward the door, but before they crossed the threshold, she paused. Her voice softened, carrying something colder, almost fragile. "He's not building soldiers, Admiral. He's building believers. That's the difference. They won't just fight for orders. They'll fight for faith. And faith doesn't break." The Admiral's eyes darkened. "Then we'll give them something to fear." They stepped into the corridor together. The officers who had arrested her straightened, confusion and unease rippling through the ranks as they saw their Admiral walking in lockstep with the woman they'd once called an impostor. He said nothing to them. His silence was order enough. Down the hall, a secure elevator waited. The Admiral swiped his clearance, and the doors opened with a hiss that sounded like the breath of something waking from a long sleep. He motioned her inside. As the doors closed, she turned to him, her eyes sharp, unflinching. "Once we start, Admiral, there's no undoing it. No hiding again." He nodded once, a slow, deliberate gesture. "Then let history never know. Let it stay blind. But let the world stay safe." The elevator plunged, carrying them deep beneath the facility, into levels few had ever seen. The hum of power grew louder, a subterranean heartbeat pulsing in the walls. She knew where they were going. She had been here before, long ago, when she was young enough to still believe in absolutes. The doors slid open, revealing a corridor lined with reinforced doors, each one sealed with codes that hadn't been touched in years. Behind those doors, the forgotten waited, the buried weapons the world wasn't supposed to remember. The Admiral walked first, his stride heavy with resolve. She followed, her steps lighter, but every bit as lethal. At the end of the hall, the Admiral stopped at the largest door, its steel face scarred from a time when they thought fire alone could erase secrets. He pressed his hand against the scanner. Lights flickered, codes unraveled, locks released. With a final hiss, the door groaned open. Inside was silence, darkness, and the faint outline of cases, lockers, and records that had no right to exist. The Admiral's voice was low, almost reverent. Welcome back to the program, Lieutenant. Her gaze swept the chamber, and for the first time, something like fire flickered in her eyes. Not rage, not grief, but purpose. Then let's wake the ghosts. Somewhere beyond that steel and concrete, the architect was already moving his pieces. But here, in the deepest shadows of the world, two figures stood on the edge of a storm that would decide more than victory or defeat. It would decide whether humanity belonged to nations or to the nightmares it created. And as the vault lights flickered on one by one, illuminating the weapons, the files, the secrets of a war never meant to be fought, the Admiral and the woman he had once buried knew the truth. History would never tell their story, but the world would live because of it. And that was enough.